So we have this question here. It says, imagine you are a policy advisor for a government considering raising the minimum wage. Some argue it will help low-income workers, while others fear it will lead to job losses. Number one, analyze the impact of a minimum wage increase on the labor supply curve for low-skilled workers. So, colleagues, remember, what is the relationship between the wage rate and the supply of labor? Mr. Manasseh, quantity of labor supplied. We have labor demand here. We have labor supply. Remember, there's a positive relationship between the wage rate and the supply of labor, holding other things constant. Meaning, colleagues, if a company increases wages, workers are going to be more inclined to want to work at that company and supply their labor. Because remember, it's workers who supply labor. Okay, as you can see, an upward sloping curve here. As the wage rate increases, more workers are ready to supply their labor. Okay, so let's say, for example, here, the wage rate at this for this market is, let's say, 1,500 kwacha. Okay, maybe let's say this is for a low minimum skilled job. Okay, because remember, low skilled workers. So these are the jobs where even people who just finished grade 12, these are the jobs they can do. Okay, anyone can do these jobs, all right? Yes. So now government is increasing the minimum wage. They say, okay, no, instead of paying these workers 1,500, we're going to add a minimum wage of 2,500 here. Okay. Oh, and remember, labor demand, it's companies who demand labor. At high wages, companies don't want to hire many workers, so they demand low labor. At lower wages, companies want to hire workers because the labor is cheaper. That's why you have a downward sloping curve like this. All right. So government has introduced a minimum wage. Remember the minimum wage, this is the minimum amount people should be paid. And if you pay less than this amount, it's illegal. Okay. So let's say when the wage was 1,500, let's say maybe there were 1,000 workers. Okay. Now they've increased the minimum wage to 2,500. So now this is going to look attractive to people who don't have jobs. Okay, maybe at 1,500, people are reluctant. That's too low. Maybe let me look for other jobs anywhere else. But now they've increased the minimum wage to 2,500. So now this is going to grab the attention of all the low skilled workers because now the minimum wage has increased by 1,000 wage. So it means the wage rate has increased. So what is going to happen when there's a minimum when government increases the minimum wage? More workers will be ready to supply their labor. Okay. Let's see, the labor supply is going to be, let's say, 1,500. Okay. And now firms, on the other side, firms are going to demand less labor. Because imagine you had maybe, let's say, 5 people or maybe 10 people who you're paying 1,500 each. So your labor bill was 15,000. Now the minimum wage has increased to 2,500. So with 10 people, it means you're paying now 25,000 wage. So as a job, you wouldn't want to, since the labor cost has increased by that amount, you would lower your workers. You demand less labor because the labor cost has increased. So you find jobs are now demanding, let's say, 500 workers here. Okay. So the impact of a minimum wage increase on the supply curve is going the labor supply is going to increase. Okay. Labor supply is going to increase, right? Because some people are attracted to the new wage, right? So what's the overall impact? You're going to have a surplus of labor because labor supply will exceed labor demanded. More people want to work, but few people would want to employ. So this minimum wage increase is going to increase the labor supply for low skilled workers. Okay, put it here. The minimum wage increase will increase the supply of labor, and this will exceed the demand for labor. Therefore, there will be a labor surplus in the market. Okay, colleagues, any questions on this? Okay, so even here, I'll send you these answers here, the formal answers. Okay, but have you seen a higher wage usually increases the quantity of labor supplied? Okay, more people become willing to look for work because an employment now offers better income. Some people who were not previously working, such as students, unemployed persons, and people doing unpaid work, may enter the labor market. That's why you're going to see a surplus because people are now entering because the minimum wage has increased. This is shown as a movement upward along the supply curve. Okay, so as you can see, our equilibrium point A here, we move to point B in terms of labor supply. At first, labor supply was 1,000. Now it's moved up to 1,500. Okay, so this is shown as a movement upward along the labor supply curve rather than a shift of the whole curve. Okay. The labor supply curve shifts only when factors such as population, education, migration, or workers' preferences change. Okay. So when population increases, it means there are more people who are going to be in the workforce. So the labor supply curve will shift. All right. Yes. The more education people get, it means the labor markets now gets filled with graduates. Okay, and it starts increasing. So even labor supplies increases. Okay, remember every year people are graduating. Those people who graduate are entering the labor market. So the supply of labor is basically increasing. Right? Even migration of workers, if workers come in from other countries with especially for low skilled jobs, it means the labor supply is going to now increase more because there are a lot of people who are willing to work. Okay. Yes. So as you can see, however, the minimum wage is fixed above the market equilibrium wage, right? And you're going to have an excess supply of work, of labor, which means more unemployment because it doesn't mean that since more people want jobs, they are going to get those jobs. No, it just means the more people who are willing to work, but not all of them will get jobs. So it means unemployment levels will increase also. Yes. Any questions before we go to part B? Okay. Explain how this policy might affect youth unemployment in the short run and in the long run. So in the short run, youth unemployment is going to increase. Why? Because more people are entering into the labor market. Okay. But not all of those people are going to get jobs because remember, when the minimum wage increases, theoretically, it means it's expensive for businesses. So those businesses might cut off existing workers. Okay. So two things are happening here. The minimum wage has increased. A lot of people are interested in getting that job. But at the same time, businesses are cutting off their their workers. They are laying off workers. As I gave that example where you hear where we said you have 10 workers, okay, you originally have 10 workers, right? And they're getting paid 1,500. Now the wage increases to 2,500. You cannot keep all these 10 workers. So you might lay off five so that you remain with five workers. So those five who you have laid off, they become unemployed now. And they are now with the other unemployed workers who are looking for, who want to get this job. So in the short run, unemployment will rise. Okay, unemployment is going to rise. Why? Because workers are getting laid off. Because with this example, this is one company. So now imagine it's companies across the country. Okay, companies will be laying off, and you find in totality the unemployment rate increases. So basically, in the short run, unemployment levels can increase. Okay, because people are getting laid off, and other people are also entering into the labor market. Remember, someone who's unemployed in economics is someone who hasn't got a job but is actively looking for a job. Remember, that's the definition of unemployment. Someone who hasn't got a job but is actively looking for a job. Then a discouraged worker is someone who hasn't got a job and is not looking for a job. So now when the minimum wage increases, even those discouraged workers, now they'll start looking for jobs and now they'll enter into the market. So more people are entering into the labor market now. So the supply of labor is going to increase, but firms are not hiring all those people. So unemployment is going to increase. Then in the long run, unemployment will also increase further because companies might find technology to substitute those low skilled jobs. Okay, theoretically. Okay. So, like say this example of this company where we had 10 workers, the minimum wage increased to five workers, all right, we're getting paid 2,500. In the long run, probably the company might find technology, okay, that can replace the workers, especially like in the assembly lines, the assembly line industries there. And these industries where people are doing repetitive jobs, where a machine can, if you just buy a machine, that machine can do the work of 100 people. So if companies are able to substitute their labor with capital, with machines, it means more people get unemployed. So if I find these five workers, this company has now found a machine that can do the work of, let's say, three workers. So you say, okay, from these five, let's lay off three, so that at least we've got two workers and one machine. We'll still be able to be productive. So now what does that mean? More unemployment. Okay, because the companies have found a way to substitute the labor with capital. So let me just read the official answer. Okay. So in the short run, youth unemployment is likely to increase. Okay. The higher minimum wage raises the cost of employing young workers. So employers may reduce the number of people they hire because many young workers have little experience and lower productivity. Okay. So basically, if I was saying from the job side, from the employer's perspective, okay, because we look at these low skilled jobs, all right. So you find if the minimum wage increases, employers will be like, now I'm paying all this money for these unskilled jobs. No, let me lay off some workers, okay. At the same time, more young people enter the labor market because the wage is now high. As I said, two things are happening. People are entering the labor market. So those people are unemployed, so they're increasing the unemployment rate. Then at the same time, firms are laying off people. So again, the unemployment rate is also increasing again. Okay. So this means the supply of young workers increases while the demand for them falls. As a result, more young people remain unemployed. Okay. In the long run, youth unemployment may increase further if firms respond by using machines, automation, or experienced workers instead of younger workers. Okay. Firms may also move some activities to places where labor is cheaper. So you find from the city they move to the village because there they'll know that they'll be the only employer and they can pay people lower wages. So some firms might even go in extreme cases. Okay. Yes. This reduces entry level job opportunities for young people. So as we can see, in the long run, these workers can be replaced by machines, automation, or even experienced workers. Maybe the company will say, okay, one experienced worker is worth like five of these unskilled workers. So why keep more of these unskilled workers when we can bring one experienced worker who can do the job faster? Okay. Yes. So usually, all in all, what this is saying is this: when government is about to implement the minimum wage, they must be aware of these effects that can happen. Okay. Because government, yes, they can implement that, but the employers are going to react negatively to that. Okay, when government increases the minimum wage, the employers will react negative to that. So government must find ways so that also it can help the employers battle these new higher labor costs. Okay, maybe reducing some taxes here and there, right? Offering training programs like that to make the workers more productive. Yes. So in the long run, unemployment increases. In the short run, unemployment increases, and in the long run, it also increases further. Okay, because still in the long run, other people will still want this job. Okay. Yes. Any questions?